west or about 60 miles to the south-southeast of Salinas Cruz, Mexico. Top sustained winds right now 50 miles per hour, drifting northward, probably only about 3, 4, or 5 miles per hour. Very close to land right now. Estimated pressures at 1,000 millibars. And once again, we don't expect Olaf to really do much of anything from this point forward because it is very close to land. And during the last couple of days, we did see a nice anticyclone overhead, nice area of high pressure, which we'd like to see. That basically has weakened considerably. So Olaf right now is going to make landfall and continue to move northward very slowly. And within a couple of days, there is a chance it could reemerge over the Bay of Campeche or the far southern parts of the Gulf of Mexico, something we may have to watch for at that time. But right now, nothing really to worry about. We still have some tropical storm warnings out all the way from Punta Maldonado all the way towards Tapachula in the state of Mexico right now, in the country of Mexico, along these areas, on the west coast of Mexico. And once again, as we put this into motion, you can see yesterday at this time we saw lots of deep convection, a very, very big blob of convection right in through here. Right now it looks very disorganized. It's very close to land, so it's interacting with that. And that once again is spelling some troubles for Olaf as it continues to work its way very slowly towards the north. And it does look like it's going to be making landfall within the next several hours. The big deal with Olaf right now will not be the very, very strong winds. It's going to be the heavy rainfall and mudslides as it begins to move on northward across land during the next couple of days. Another problem spot has been, of course, the state of Florida. Upper level storm has been parked right over southwestern or south central Alabama during the last couple of days, and the flow from the tropics all the way from Cuba and even beyond there to the south up towards the north has caused a lot of rainfall around Tampa. Here's one of the indications, again, where you don't need a tropical storm or a depression to dump a heck of a lot of rainfall on an area. That's exactly what did happen during this past weekend around Tampa. Again, up to 15 inches of rainfall in and around the Tampa area. Severe flooding has gone on. We'll be having some live reports a little bit later on this morning from the Tampa area and Jim Cantori and see exactly what's going on down that way and see if any of the waters are beginning to recede at the present time and beginning to soak in. Now today for most of Florida, some pretty good news. We're looking at another lobe of rain coming back into the area right around Miami and West Palm right now, but around Tampa itself, looks like some dry air is working in from the west, and that's some pretty good news because it looks like dry weather for most of Florida today. The worst of the weather right now will be moving northward with the area of low pressure right into the Carolinas and northward. Once again, not a tropical system, just an old front, and once again interacting with a lot of moisture from the tropics. That caused all of the rainfall. What's going on across the western Caribbean right now? Not a bunch of, really not much of anything. We're looking at a couple of waves during the last couple of days, one located just to the east of the islands, but now we pick up some very strong westerly winds aloft. Not conducive for tropical storm or depression development. So once again, nothing to worry about here. We can take you farther eastward, a couple of healthy waves once again, but one more time, you don't see any organization. Things are beginning to fall apart as we're looking at strong westerly winds aloft, and the same thing goes all the way over towards the Cape Verde Islands and also off the west coast of Africa. The big news right now has to be Typhoon Ginger, which is still packing winds right now up to 130 miles per hour. Not a super typhoon anymore. It's making its curve now to the north and eventually towards the northeast. This will get caught up in the strong westerly winds and may have an impact in the United States in the Pacific Northwest by about Wednesday or Thursday with heavy rains and maybe some more strong winds too. More on that coming up a little bit later. Now this.
On Earth has better weather.
Okay, here we go. Checking on the tropics for you, and our main feature the past several days. What has it been? It's been the moisture plume coming right up into Florida, and we've been talking all about the heavy rains and the flooding. We've shown you Jim Cantori in Ruskin up to his knees in the water there. But now things are starting to break up as an upper low starts to push its way westward across the Caribbean. So that's been kind of giving this a moisture plume the pinch, but unfortunately for those of you who live in South Florida, looks like it's your turn now as this moisture plume is just going to hang out here in your vicinity the next couple of days. Meanwhile, out in the Atlantic, 1, 2 upper lows here, and around the upper lows, a pretty brisk flow, and you know what that means. That means conditions are hostile and not favorable for tropical development. Lastly, another feature right here is Olaf. Kristen mentioned Olaf, and Olaf is a tropical storm, and it's easing its way towards the coast of Mexico. More on that in a moment. First, let's talk about Florida. Upper low that found itself a home over the heart of Dixie, Alabama, finally on the move now. It's around Atlanta, Georgia. That will continue to ease northeastward. And around the upper low, we are starting to see some drier air come on in, but still a little bit of lifting. And we have seen some heavy showers. A little line here. They come right through North Florida, through Jacksonville and Ocala. But the main plume of moisture is down here, and you can see it focusing on the southern peninsula, and that's where we've seen some of our heavier downpours. But we are not looking for the rain to repeat over the same areas like we saw earlier and farther north. So there will be heavy rains, but it looks like precipitation on the move. So we're not looking for the flooding, the excessive type of rainfall. Farther north, here's that little band of heavy showers I was showing you from right around Amelia Island and right down through Jacksonville and over towards Ocala. That's moving right along. You might pick up a tenth or a couple of tenths of an inch with this as it zips on by. Here's Olaf, and Olaf, as of 8 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time, 16.0 north, 94.6 west. That's right here. This is 15, and this is 95, so 16, 94.6. That gives you the center of circulation, and the wind's 50 miles an hour. The movement northerly at 5, so it's a slow mover, and the winds are not forecast to intensify as this moves in later today and in particular this evening, and tropical storm warnings continue from Punta Maldonado to Tapachula. And as we show you our satellite picture, you can see a little puff of white right here. That's the tropical storm. You can see how small it is. It's tiny here, and this will move its way northward into Mexico here, and as it hits the highlands, should be quite a release of rainfall and the potential for flash flooding. As we go to the visible satellite picture, we zoom in real close, and here you can see our tropical storm right here. And it has a tight little circulation, winds about 50 miles an hour, and the winds should really decrease rapidly once this moves in the next 6 to 12 hours. And then once it just kind of drifts about here, it will meet its demise in the mountains, but it will rain itself out. The potential is there for flash flooding. As we go to the Caribbean, upper low spinning westward, weak wave coming in through the windwards and leewards, and we have seen some showers on the radar out of San Juan this morning. We've looked to the east, and you can see a little bit of activity here. Nothing major, but still some showers sprinkled about. And then as we go farther out in the Atlantic, there's that westerly flow. Conditions not favorable for any development at all. Then in the West Pacific, Ginger's still holding on. I checked the latest advisory out, it's still saying 110 knots, so it's still blowing pretty good. But this is forecast to weaken dramatically as it moves north and northeastward, and then gets caught up in the westerlies here. And notice the flow here, hit it right off the globe, and downstream, eventually, some of this energy will be affecting the northwest, but not today.
What's happening in the tropics? The eastern Pacific is where we start. Tropical storm Olaf trying to make landfall. Finally, it's getting closer and closer to the coast. In fact, as of 2 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, just about on the coast, 35 miles east of Salina Cruz, Mexico. And here are the coordinates. Again, the system centered near this latitude, 16.2 north and 94.7 west. Drifting north, estimated pressure has been increased from the previous 1,000 millibar now up to 1,002. We still have the tropical storm warnings in effect, but they are expected to be dropped, canceled fairly soon. From Punta Maldonado, southeast along that Mexican coastline all the way down to Tapachula, the tropical storm warning in effect. Visible satellite view first, then we'll check the colorized view to give you actually a better sense of what kind of weather's going on, because when you look at the visible picture, you almost get the idea that there's really not much going on here, just a few clouds spinning around. Down at Tapachula, we've had gusts today of 10 to 15 miles an hour out of the southeast, far enough away from the actual center of circulation, so wind primarily not a big problem. Now there is plenty of cloud cover, some convection way down to the south, and even near the center of circulation, we do notice an increase in some of the convection, the fairly sufficient or intense rising air motion associated with the air coming in towards the area of low pressure. Let's go ahead and take a closer perspective. We've zoomed in a little bit for you. The outline here that you see, this is the state as we head from the east and head over here. Here's Chiapas, and then as we head on towards the west, we run into Oaxaca. And in southeastern Oaxaca State, this is where we've seen most of the rain today, just a little bit drifting over occasionally into southwesternmost Chiapas. But then in the last couple of hours, you can see in central Chiapas State a line of thunderstorms perhaps getting helped out a little bit here with some of the rise in terrain. This will be a real heavy rain producing type of system from this point out. And a lot of times when these tropical systems become so weak and the actual circulation center is confined to a fairly shallow layer in the atmosphere, and then you have mountains in the way, the systems, what's left of them anyway, in the low levels, can just kind of migrate or drift down along the foothills of the mountain. So we wouldn't be surprised to see that perhaps happening tonight, and that will mean a prolonged period of very heavy precipitation over parts of the west side of the Gulf of Tehuantepec, especially for the southeastern corner of Oaxaca State. Now, what about the upper winds? Well, we do have a bit of a northerly drift coming down across Costa Rica, Panama, and you can see those high clouds drifting in that direction, kind of tracing out the motion of the clouds for us there with the upper winds. Big high off the coast of the Carolinas. Still have a big trough in the central Caribbean, and with this trough here and fairly strong west winds upstairs coming east of the islands, it's very difficult for these tropical waves to really organize the thunderstorms in any close-up perspective, and for that reason we don't see any significant development happening, at least in the short term. Western Caribbean, clouds but no organization. Here's the tail end of that big rain-making system pushing out of the southeast, and over the western Caribbean you can see the clouds are lined up here. We do have a little bit of a weak tropical wave that's pushing westward, but we still don't get the sense that anything is happening down near the Caribbean, the water surface itself, that would indicate that there's a well-defined circulation going on. Just a very large area of lower pressure, but not exactly very low. So it's not expected to be a development zone in the short term through tomorrow. Notice the clouds here again, testimony to the strong winds aloft. This tropical wave will push into the islands and cause some locally heavy rain in the next 24 to 36 hours and even farther east. Again, lots of clouds, but the upper winds doing their part to shear these tropical waves as they move off the coast initially and head over the open waters of the Atlantic. And finally, there's Typhoon Ginger starting to make the big track northeast bound. It's moving north-northeast right now, but it will accelerate tomorrow as it starts to feel the influence of that steering flow of strong upper-level westerlies to the north. We'll keep you updated on our tropical storm Olaf in the eastern Pacific.